From a nature boy who didn't know when to call it a day, to a dead man who refused to let his career rest in peace. I'm Gareth, you are watching What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 wrestlers who should have stayed retired. Number 10, Ric Flair. Often considered the greatest professional wrestler of all time in spite of countless personal indiscretions that could and should have realistically tarnished any legacy forever, Ric Flair just can't and won't call time. His retirement match at WrestleMania 24 against Shawn Michaels was the perfect send-off. Maybe up to that point, the best in the history of the entire industry. There was no bigger stage, put on as it was by the market leader in an act of genuine respect and deference to a locker room that mostly idolized the Nature Boy. But Flair's story did not end there. Nope. He returned to the ring in 2009, just 1 year later, to do some Australian house shows with Hulk Hogan before becoming a semi-regular TNA TV act the following year. He was then back at it again in 2022 at the age of 73 for a one-shot last match pay-per-view against Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal alongside Andrade, his son-in-law. These matches were a far cry from his heyday, with the latter particularly raising concerns over his health and safety. It was terrifying, to be honest. Flair's return did little to enhance his legacy. Instead, it left fans worried, nostalgic, or just simply depressed thinking of a long-distance time when Flair could live up to his many monikers. Number 9, Shawn Michaels. As with his aforementioned WrestleMania 24 rival, Shawn Michaels is another name that still crops up when discussing the legitimate greatest to ever do it. The conversation might be more divided than it once was, thanks to the obvious influences Michaels' style left on future generations and NXT trainees, for better and worse, but try not to be totally shouted down by the haters. HBK has the CV to match any of the all-timers, and his retirement match against The Undertaker at WrestleMania 26 was a perfect illustration of that. Michaels rode off into the sunset with his head held high. So high, in fact, that he heard the constant calls for a return and defiantly said no. All until a controversial deal with the Saudi Arabian Sports Authority produced a dollar figure too great for him to turn down. In 2018, this sexy boy teamed with Triple H against The Undertaker and Kane at the second Saudi show Crown Jewel, and played his part in a match that was universally and correctly panned. It was crap. The bout was marred by botches and the undeniable reality that the four were brutally past their prime. The return did little more than sully his first send-off and stain his record with one of his biggest turkeys. Silly boy. So yeah, that first Shawn Michaels retirement match against The Undertaker was pretty incredible, right? And that's got me thinking, what is your favorite ever retirement match? Let's just forget about if it wasn't really a proper retirement in the end, yeah? Pop those answers in the comments. Number 8, Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan is easily the most recognizable name in professional wrestling, and at this point courts infamy as much as he ever did the bright lights of standard issue fame and fortune. But even discounting every gross detail that's emerged about the views he holds beyond promos, his post-full-time wrestling run remains full of misses rather than hits. Hogan's initial farewell from the ring came in the early 2000s, following a last WWE Championship winning run that flattered to deceive. From there, he continued to make sporadic appearances for the market leader, but when that well ran dry, he embarked on a TNA run that was nothing short of a disaster. The matches were plodding, the promos lacked the energy and bizarre believability of his heyday, and his physical limitations were painfully evident, save for one magic night against Sting at Bound for Glory 2011, but you know it is Sting. Hogan's aura of invincibility was shattered, brother, and each subsequent appearance only further tarnished his once untouchable legacy. That his presence had actively damaged the company's standing in the industry hung over the run too. He was mostly as terrible a booker as he was a talent. Number 7, The Undertaker. No matter how successful he gets at pulling YouTube faces for his podcast, The Undertaker's career will always be synonymous with decades of destruction and dominance in WWE, particularly at WrestleMania, where he built a 21-0 winning streak that surely won't ever be touched. I would be surprised. His streak-breaking match against Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 30 could have been the perfect moment to hang up the boots, and per his network docuseries, it was that fairy tale ending he'd always been looking for. However, The Undertaker continued to wrestle, with mostly stinkers to his post-2014 name. While there were still flashes of brilliance, the Graveyard Dogs was inspired in concept and execution. There were far more lows. shows. The infamous match against Goldberg at Super Showdown 2019 was a catastrophe, with both men struggling to perform basic moves, culminating in a match that had fans wincing in discomfort. I still have nightmares about it. Another problem, it wasn't the only one from around that time, and as an act that was saved almost exclusively for big stages, his shockers were being viewed by the biggest possible audiences. Not good. His final match against AJ Styles at WrestleMania 36 was a fitting end to his run proper, but the years of diminishing performances before it left something of a bittersweet taste. Number 6. Mick Foley. When Mick Foley stopped and stared back at the life he was walking away from at No Way Out 2000, he looked every bit like he believed he was doing it for the last time. His autobiography said much the same. He was prepared to call it a day before being offered the right amount of money to do one more favor and go back on his word to main event WrestleMania weeks later. Leaning into just how stupid it looked, he at least accepted that as the real final outing. All until he was teased back to work with the task of elevating Randy Orton to the next level between 2003 and 2004. The cycle repeated 2 years later with Edge, and just when it honestly seemed like jobs outside the ring were going to define his future, he jumped to TNA and eventually became world champion. Not least because of the heights of 2000, 2004, and 2006, the returns were naturally diminished. Getting by on star power and a willingness to get grisly if the stipulation called for it, Foley's TNA run was still a mixed bag at its best, but sadly served as the real end of the line. When that wrapped, all that remained was a 2011 indie date and 2012 Royal Rumble cameo. Foley himself seemingly wanted a different closing chapter. He openly petitioned for a retirement death match as a 60th birthday present to himself, but doctors stepped in to nope it based on his legendarily long list of injuries. Probably for the best. You got nothing left to prove, Mick. If you're enjoying this video today, my friend, then hit that subscribe button down below and you will get even more of these What Culture Wrestling videos each and every day. Sounds like a good time to me, so do it. Number 5. Roddy Piper. Diminished returns are always the central theme of lists such as these, but Roddy Piper was the sort of performer who never allowed any part of himself to look diminished. That, regrettably, became a big part of the problem with each return he made following his mid-1990s peak. Now, realistically, Piper couldn't ever touch the mastery he achieved at any of his iconic peaks between 1983 and 1992, but an alignment-flipped run against Hulk Hogan for WCW in 1996 and 1997 proved that he had box office muscle even if match quality had died on the vine. What tanked the hot Scot in his latter years was his inability to back up his ever-powerful promos. A microphone maestro right up to his last appearances on screen, few talked as good a game, or at least with the sort of machismo that Piper exuded. And, well, then the bell rang. His 2006 nostalgia run alongside Ric Flair skewed more sad than sweet, as did his well-intentioned face-off with Jimmy Snuka at the 2008 Royal Rumble, though Punk marking out over it will always be fun. And a Legends bout against Chris Jericho at WrestleMania was saved by Ricky Steamboat, not Rowdy Roddy. Nobody cares now, and nor should they, but the best days of Piper's final decade were comfortably spent on the stick rather than the mat. Number 4. Bill Goldberg. Bill Goldberg was an unstoppable force in WCW during the late 1990s, to such a degree that even the wretched booking that defined the company's dying days could not quieten chants for his name in the years following its closure. And that was ultimately the biggest creative crime attached to his 2003-2004 WWE run. The fans tired of the version of demand they were given by the time he exited at WrestleMania 20. They'd had enough of him. His return to WWE in 2016 was subsequently met with trepidation rather than excitement. But a thrilling series with Brock Lesnar changed everything. At long last, booked to perfection in his Survivor Series and WrestleMania matches with the Beast, his short, sharp shock of an undisputed title reign looked and felt like the perfect way for him to put a bow on his career, while also exercising the demons of his first failed run. No one else should have been next, in other words. Then, frustratingly, on it continued. A disaster against The Undertaker in Saudi Arabia remains the headline, but the Super Showdown 2019 contest wasn't the only stinker, folks, and fans pounced on the lost magic. Save for a remarkably cool squash win over Dolph Ziggler at SummerSlam later that year as a rehab, his increasingly labored efforts and controversial creative decisions such as an easy victory over the Fiend Bray Wyatt ahead of WrestleMania 36 did much to undo the incredible Lesnar 1-2 punch. Here's hoping he can end end things on a more positive note with his upcoming retirement match in WWE, right? Yeah, fingers crossed. Number 3, Kurt Angle. Realistically underrated considering how few greatest of all time lists he features in. Kurt Angle was and is a contemporary wrestling icon that has the matches, the promos, and the numbers to back up one of the most legendary runs in the history of the industry. It stood to reason then that when finished with TNA and a celebrated run on the UK independent scene during its boom, he'd explore one last run in WWE. What materialized simply did not live up to expectations though, even if it started magnificently with him subbing for Roman Reigns as a one-night member of The Shield. What a night that was. The wear and tear had understandably caught up with the Olympic hero, and it mattered not that fans were willing to forgive the ravages of time. Vince McMahon and others around him were not. Kurt's 2019 and, as of recording, in-ring career ended with a whimper rather than a bang. He lost to Baron Corbin deep into an overlong WrestleMania in front of a crowd too tired to get up for only okay action. Poor Kurt. Number 2, Kane. Kane mostly always sucked bell to bell. Name 5 great singles matches or 10 great tag matches from a 20-plus year run. No, you can't. But the more he finally disappeared from view, the more it stung when he returned. Charmless as a character nearly 2 full decades into his main roster career, his full-time run as the Authority's school trousers-wearing goon stripped him of any remaining aura and/or magical powers that might have continued to carry him even further past his expiry date. The diminished returns from there were such that a move into politics was as welcome for wrestling fans as it was the cranks that follow him on social media. A walking, talking example of WWE simply just doing things. His reinsertion into the main event picture in and around the 2018 Royal Rumble was creatively pathetic. Braun Strowman was no more established as the roster's new monster by beating Kane, any more than he was getting drilled in the head for real by Brock Lesnar. And at least those stiff strikes only hurt Strowman rather than everybody having to watch. And number 1, Stone Cold Steve Austin. But only until 2022 when he absolutely nailed it. The Texas Rattlesnake has always been fiercely protective over himself and his legacy. So much so that one of the few times he almost got back in the ring before a glorious WrestleMania 38 contest with Kevin Owens was binned when he smartly elected not to turn up to Taboo Tuesday 2005 and lose to Jonathan Coachman. Oddly, the defeat wouldn't have felt anywhere near as preposterous then as it would do now. The quiet dignity around Austin's WrestleMania 19 was very him. A clued-in Jim Ross was permitted to speak in glowing terms of his run atop the industry as he departed following a loss to The Rock. But nobody else was any the wiser that this really was it for the toughest SOB. What followed in the months afterwards was anything but dignified though. A parody of himself as the co-Raw GM and/or sheriff of the show, Austin later said he needed to get away from wrestling for a sustained period to truly get it out of his system. There were other, more fan-friendly reasons for him to step away. Still, that Mania 38 comeback was awesome, and I will always take the chance to salute that night. Now continue your YouTube retirement journey with What Culture Wrestling by tapping on this ace 10 WWE legends who should have retired at WrestleMania list. Have fun with it, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.